Hey everyone, it's Jessica, and today I am going to show you how to thread sequins through some embroidery floss. So there's your supply list. I've got all my items gathered up here. I've got some scissors, an embroidery floss, a craft needle that has a small enough head to get through your sequins, but large enough to fit your embroidery floss through there. Now I have a 6-strand embroidery floss here, but I use a 3-strand, so I will show you how I kind of take that apart. And then I'm using a page protector, some sequins, and a template of a pumpkin today. So I'm going ahead and get started by just putting some light adhesive on my template. I'm just using this on my page protector here as a guide to poke some holes with my little brad tool. I call it a brad tool, but it's the tool that came with my So Easy mat below this, which is the pink thing. It's just like a foam board, and that comes with it so that you can poke your holes to actually put your thread through. So I'm just going through and poking all the holes all around my little pumpkin here, which I have pre-cut on my Cricut cutting machine. And if you don't have that, you can use a template from anything. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but I wanted a pumpkin because this is actually going to go into my fall mini album. So I'm just poking holes the whole way around this, and I'm keeping them spaced so that they are about the same width apart as I would if I were stitching this by hand. So you can see here, I'm going to hold this up and show you about how far apart they are. So they're pretty close. And then I'm going to go ahead and separate my threads. This is, again, a 6-strand floss. So I only want to use 3 strands. And you can see if you kind of fray it apart at the end, it'll come apart fairly easily, but you don't want the strand to be too long, because what I've found is if I have too long of a strand here, which you'll see in a second, it just kind of starts to get tangled up and it's really hard to separate, and it just kind of ends up in one big knot. So you'll see me here just kind of trim that off, and then I will end up using the excess whenever I run out. So you don't need a ton of it to start. I like to work with strands that are long enough to keep going for a while, but again, short enough that they don't get super tangled. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cut this apart here in a moment, and then I'll use the rest of it, but I'm just going to cut this piece off and just start with this. I do like to use a piece of tape, just like some Scotch clear tape, to tape down the tail end whenever I first start my strand and end my strand, and I'll kind of tuck that in behind where my threads are going to go, so in the end you don't even see that, even though it's a clear page protector. Here I have a really cheap set of craft needles that I got from Walmart, and it has a large enough head in it that it gets my little needle threader through here, but yet I can still fit all of that embroidery floss through there as well. And you want a needle that has a head that is small enough to also go through the sequins, because it has a hole in the middle of the sequins, so you want to make sure that your needle is going to fit through there. So I would definitely test that out before you start this. So as you can see here, I am just starting the first one. I poked it in from the back side. That way I could tape the end of it to the back side of my pumpkin, and it'll be very nicely hidden. So as you can see here, I've just dumped a pile of sequins on my desk here on my glass mat, and I am just using the end of my needle to poke through each one. I like to put about 3 or 4 of them when I'm doing this kind of technique, and then I just pull them down through the thread, and I just mix and match where I have them and where I want them to go. So as you can see here, I am just doing this once again on the other side as I pull through each layer, because I want them to be on both sides in this case, since I'm using a clear page protector to go into my album. So I went sequins on both sides, so I'm just going to continue to work at this, just adding sequins each time I pull through the top or the bottom, and then I'm just going to stagger them throughout my design as I go. Now you can see that tail end there where I started, but no worries. Once you get all these threads in there, and I double them up a couple times as well and go through a few of the holes a few times to get it to the thickness that I want and fullness, so you're never going to see those tails whenever it's all said and done. So I'm just working with this, pulling it tight as I go, but just be careful not to pull it too tight, because then you'll kind of ruffle the page protector. You could also do this with a clear sheet of acetate or a piece of vellum, or you can even do this on cardstock. I've done this on scrapbook layouts as well, where I use regular thread instead of this embroidery floss. I've used the same floss. I've done a lot of different threading in a lot of different crafty projects, so you can use this technique in multiple ways, but I'm just showing you this one way how I create this for my little mini album. So I just continue building this and going between each layer on the front and the back and just kind of working with those sequins as I go. You can see they're really easy to pick up because that tip on my needle is pretty sharp. So it's really super easy to get them to go onto the needle, and then you just pull them through on that embroidery floss. They pretty much stay put. They don't move around a whole lot because they're pretty tight with that embroidery floss, and I don't have to worry about them moving or shifting too much in my album. So you can see it's getting a little bit fuller at this point. I'm going to fast forward this and I'm going to show you what it looks like when I'm all finished. So here's what the finished result looks like. You can see it's really full and kind of chunky in just the way that I like it. And now it's ready to go into my mini album. So isn't that so pretty? Just sparkly and all that goodness. And here's another example of it on a layout just with some plain thread. I hope you guys enjoyed this technique today, and I hope I've inspired you to create something beautiful. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.